you, Dennis, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see you all here. I'm glad we didn't have a snow blizzard and it was just a slight little bit of rain. But I'm also really glad you're here to learn about why you should eat your sea vegetables. After all, they are the oldest plant on Earth. Just a couple years ago, they found a fossil of red seaweed that was 1.6 billion years old. So, if that's not enough, eat your seaweed and you will live to be 200 years old. Now that makes a lot of sense. If they're really old plants and you eat these seaweeds, you'll live forever. At least that's what it says in this Health and Beauty from the Sea book that's from the 1960s. So maybe if you decide that you're not going to eat your sea vegetables, you might like to take a day at the spa and actually end up having a bath with the seaweeds to be able to get your health benefits of the seaweeds. So I think that seaweeds and sea vegetables are definitely the next, well, maybe not the next fountain of youth, they are the fountain of youth. So you're going to learn all about this today. So seaweed has been eaten in China since 2700 BC and in Japan since 800 AD. So it's been around, of course it's been around in the ocean a long time, as we said, 1.6 billion years. But it's been part of civilization, especially in Asia, for a long time. And the farming of seaweed is growing very rapidly. It's grown in about 50 different countries throughout the world. And right now, the demand for seaweed actually is higher than the supply is there. So seaweeds are known for its use in the food industry, animal feeds, fertilizers, pharmaceuticals, and cosmetics. How many of you eat seaweeds? Good. How many of you would like to eat seaweeds and sea vegetables if you knew more about them? Yay! Okay, so I'm going to take a poll at the end and find out if I've convinced you. So as Dennis said, I have a strong passion for seafood and sea vegetables and cooking, and I just love to eat seaweed and have been eating seaweeds probably for at least 20 years. So not only is there quite a love for seaweed, I'm also very interested in the fact that they're a sustainable crop, and they're very good for our environment. And so unlike land plants that need fresh water, our sea vegetables and seaweeds, and I'll use that term interchangeably. So if I say sea vegetables, I'm meaning seaweeds and sea vegetables. So they need salt water. They don't require the fresh water. And then also, they pick up the nutrients from our environment or from our aquaculture system. They produce oxygen, and they're really good for mitigating ocean acidification by being able to remove CO2 from the water. So here at Harbor Branch, you've probably heard Dr. Paul Wills talk about our integrated multi-trophic aquaculture system, or short term as IMTA. And this is a really interesting system because it has these what we call fed cultures, which is here the fish and also the shrimp. So you put the feed in, and what's really fantastic about this is that the waste products that come out from the fish and the shrimp can then be used for other organisms in the system. So for instance, the sea urchins and the sea cucumbers and the oysters can all pick up the waste and the nutrients in the water, and then the seaweeds or sea vegetables pick up all the dissolved nutrients that are in the water and help to convert them into plants. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is this part of the IMTA system. But without the rest of the IMTA system, these seaweeds wouldn't grow as actively in our facility here at Harbor Branch. So we just recently embarked on a new project because the culturing of seaweeds has been going on here at Harbor Branch since the 1970s. And Dr. Dennis Hanasak is one of the world's leaders in growing sea vegetables and seaweeds. And so we've decided that we want to look at sea vegetables, meaning seaweeds and sea vegetables, for human consumption. So we were awarded a small grant this year to be able to look at the nutrition and the marketing of sea vegetables. And this is from the license plate, the Florida Aquaculture license plate, which is granted through the Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute Foundation. And so this is a year-long project, so you all are the first to hear the breaking data that I'm going to present to you today. And we have about another 4 or 5 months of this particular project. So I'd like to introduce you to the players, the team. I'm the principal investigator on the project, and then Dennis Hanaszak is the co-principal investigator. Dr. Paul Wills is co-PI, and then we have a food scientist that's been working with us, Jennifer Conway. I'd also like to give recognition to the research biologists that make it possible for us to have the seaweeds and sea vegetables. And then we used analytical labs for much of the analysis that I'll be presenting today, Midwest and Eurofin's laboratory. While I'm thanking the team, I'd also like to thank Brian Cousin, who's is helping now and also will be helping during the cooking. Jim Masterson is helping to film, and Jill Sunderland is in the back, always so helpful. So now let me introduce you to the sea vegetables that we're going to be talking about today. So starting up here, we have the gracilaria, which is a red seaweed. Then we have the green seaweed called ulva or sea lettuce. And then we have 2 halophyte plants. They grow on salt water, but they grow above, their roots are in the salt water and they grow above. And that's sea purslane. And then we're also going to talk about sea asparagus. So what do the systems look like where these seaweeds and sea vegetables grow? The gracilaria can grow in a very shallow, long tank. The ulva grows in these very large tanks, and the sea lettuce, ulva. And then the sea purslane grows in also narrow tanks. And then you can see the sea asparagus growing here. These are all part of the IMTA system that I was talking with you about, and it's located outside in our aquaculture development park. So I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about this particular halophyte plant, sea asparagus, Salicornia, and this is what it looks like in the wild. So you can see it's got the very long shoots here, and this is actually at the Tony Robinson Park or Preserve. And we start with all of our seaweeds and sea vegetables from a local stock. And so this particular one was started from a Florida crop, I think a little bit further up the coast. And what's interesting, What's interesting about the Salicornia, here it is as a young plant, and here it is with the seeds or the flowers. And they have tiny little flowers. This is a magnification of this part right here. So they've got these tiny little flowers that come out, and then they produce these seeds. And it's the seeds that get planted, and then they grow into the plant. So here's a growth phase of sea asparagus over a course of 8 weeks, taking a photo every 8 weeks. So here it is, just sprouted after the seeds. This is week 2. Week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6, week 7, and week 8. So it grows relatively quickly. You can have a crop in a couple of months. And when we go over to the cooking table, I just realized I've got a pot going over here. Turn that off. I'll show you the plant and the roots. So what are the benefits of eating sea vegetables? And this is what I'm going to go through with you today. So the first thing we needed to look at was what's called the Nutrition Food Label, which is a FDA label, a Food and Drug Administration label. And every product that you see out on the market has this label. And I just wanted to introduce you to the label because it used to have an original label, and now it has this new label. So the wonderful thing about the Nutrition Facts label is it informs us, the consumers, that our products are safe, wholesome, and properly labeled. So they recently had some changes. Let me just point those out to you. They made the serving size and the calories a little larger, so you could see them more visibly. They added in vitamin D and also potassium. and they removed vitamin A and C. And you might be wondering, well, why is that so? Because as a population, we're much more deficient in vitamin D and potassium than we are in vitamin A and C. It's not to say that you won't see those on the label, but this label here is the template, and anything else that a company has claimed is in their product or that they've measured in their product, it can be added to it. So they also added the micrograms or milligrams to it. So you can see over here, it just gives percentages, but this actually tells you how much. And then they reduced the daily value, because our daily value is consumption of 2,000 calories. So every percentage there is based on the daily value. So they just reduced the wording on that. So in order for us to figure out what kind of food label we wanted for our 4 sea vegetables, we had to start off by figuring out what the serving size is going to be, because everything is based on serving size, how much you'll consume of that product. So what we did is we started off looking at commercial products that are out on the market, different seaweeds that are out on the market. And this is called the recommended amount customarily consumed. So once we had a good idea of sort of where the market is in terms of what a recommended serving size was, then we went and looked at different recipes. And I actually recommend these 2 books are in your handout that with the recipes. With the recipes. So you can look and see how much is in a typical recipe for an average person. And then what we did is we said, okay, well, if we're going to decide on a serving size, let's put it on a scale and see what it looks like, and does that make sense? And so up here we have the gracilaria at 15 grams, we have 15 grams of fresh ulva, we have 15 grams of sea purslane and 15 grams or 20 grams of salicornia or the sea asparagus. So once we felt settled with that, the next step was then to write out all of our different serving sizes. There's your 15, 15. I actually went up on the sea purslane and sea asparagus recently. And then you can say, well, how many serving sizes are going to be in a package? And so in this particular case, it's 8 servings. When you buy a packet, you'll have 8 servings. We also did studies with the dried gracilaria, the sea lettuce, sea purslane. And when you look at the serving sizes of dried, it's much more reduced. That's because with the fresh seaweed, it's about 80 to 90% moisture. So by the time you dry it, you're way down to a small portion. So when you go to hydrate it, it can hydrate close up to what it would be if it's fresh. And most seaweeds today, you're going to buy dried. And so it's going to be very concentrated. You don't use a lot of dried product. And so you're going to see what I've done all along is just to remind you of the gracilaria, is the ulva, the sea purslane, and the sea asparagus. And these are considered ready-to-eat products. That's just like your fruits and vegetables, the ready-to-eat products. Okay, so these are the 4 food labels for gracilaria, ulva, sea purslane, and sea asparagus. I'm just going to take you down the list. So let's start off. There's your serving sizes and the amount per container. So we went through that. The next thing is your calories. You can see that seaweeds and sea vegetables are very low in calories, so that's a bonus. Next is your fats, and you can also see that the fats are also low, actually negligible. There's no fats in seaweeds. Then the next one is the cholesterol, 0. Starting to sound like a good superfood, right? The next one is sodium. So sodium is going to be high in these because they're grown in salt water. But you can see with the serving sizes that we chose, you're looking at 3% and 4% for the ulva, right? You're looking at 17 and 12% for the halophyte plants. That's to be expected because they're succulent plants full of salt. Now this salt that's in these seaweeds and sea vegetables is very different than your table salt. It's a much more well-rounded salt, and it's a much more digestible, better for you salt than your table salt is going to be, which can be somewhat dehydrating and caustic to the cells in our body. So then the next one is our carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are very low, but what's good about this is that they have fiber. That's what makes up the plant. There's a lot of fiber in these plants. Fiber is great for our digestion. It's great for lowering our cholesterol. So there's a lot of benefits for having fiber in our diet. What's exciting is that these seaweeds have high quality protein, 1 gram of protein, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for a plant, that's pretty awesome. And it's a very well-rounded protein, and that's something we'll probably look more into, is what the breakup of the protein is in terms of the amino acids. Okay, then we skip down into the next part of the food label, which is where the minerals and the vitamins are. And so you'll see that they all have the vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium, because that's part of a food label. But I wanted to highlight a few things. For this Gracilaria species, it's very high in potassium. Potassium is such an important part of our day-to-day. Potassium helps to, works with sodium, and it helps to regulate our blood pressure. If we get dehydrated, potassium can sometimes be low. Now in the ulva, what's interesting to see that it's high also in potassium and also in calcium. And what I'm excited to see is that the sea purslane is high in vitamin D2. D2 is a plant vitamin D. And for animal vitamin D, it's a D3, which is typically, if we're taking a supplement, we're typically taking a D3. So that was very exciting to see that finding. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out is that the sea lettuce and the sea purslane both have some iodine in both of these plant species. And as you know, iodine is very good for thyroid function. Now, iodine can also be, for some people, can be also very difficult for them to have iodine in their diet. But 1,100 micrograms is like the highest limit. And you can see that these are very low. These are 52 and 5. So they're well below what we would consider the high end. We didn't find any iodine in Gracilaria or sea asparagus. It must be so low that it's not registering for that serving size. And then the next part is we decided to look a little closer at some additional minerals and also vitamins in 2 of the species. And what we looked at is for Gracilaria and for sea asparagus, we looked at, I'll highlight the ones. We found that phosphorus and zinc is very high in Gracilaria, and we found that vitamin A, magnesium, zinc, and actually the chlorides are also registered and high in these 2 species as well. And so what you're seeing is phosphorus, and phosphorus is important for building bones. Magnesium is also really important for blood pressure and also for your muscles and nerves. And then the vitamin A, as you probably know, is very good for our eyes and our skin and our immune system. And chloride's very important too, because it balances with sodium and potassium, and it's very important for our nervous system. So what we're starting to see, and I'm sure that we'll continue to look more and more at the vitamins and the minerals of these plants, but I wanted to give you a rundown of what a powerhouse that they all are. So just to summarize that into a nutshell, or into this pie graph here, if you were to average all of these 4 species that we've been talking about into a pie graph, you'd see that they are comprised of 34% carbohydrates, 27% protein, 34% ash, that's where your vitamins and minerals are, and then a very, very small percentage of fat. So that's what it looks like I said, in a kind of a nutshell, in just a summary form for you all. So I'm going to switch gears for a minute and talk about a very important component of red seaweed, and that's called agar. And agar shows up a lot in our food. It shows up, it's a gelling agent, and it shows up in things like ice cream and toothpaste and things like that. But it's very important also in the medical field because all the petri dishes are made out of agar. And then today we're actually going to make a jello out of agar, coconut jello. And so it's a huge industry. You can see it's valued worldwide at 246 million. There's 14,000 metric tons, and it keeps growing every year. So the seaweed that we're growing here at Harbor Branch does have agar. But what got me very interested in agar is a drink in the Caribbean called the Irish moss drink or the sea moss drink. Have any of you heard of that before? Few of you have, okay. Have any of you tasted it before? Okay, great. Well, it's a very interesting drink, and I was taught by a local in St. Croix how to make it about a year ago. And so you start off with this dried seaweed, and you put it in a pot and you let it boil, and you can see it kind of goes jello-y. And then he takes it and puts it in this container here, real high tech, right? In this container, and he's boiled it with cinnamon and nutmeg, and it smells absolutely delicious. And because I'm vegan, he actually put in almond milk with it. And then if it had been after 5, you would have added rum to it as well. And so it's a hugely popular drink in the islands, and it's quite tasty. So we decided last summer, we had an intern here, and we decided as a side project we'd just derive some crude agar and from our gracilaria. So what we did is we dried the gracilaria. You can see it powdered here. And we put it into fresh water, and we let it bubble away. Now, you had to bubble it away for 4 hours. I mean, it was a really long process, but so interesting. And then after 4 hours, we had to go through the funnels here. And then in about 20 minutes, it turned into this jello. So that all came from this dried seaweed all the way through. So that just gives you an idea. And it's about 30 to 40% of the plant is this agar derivative. Okay, so the other thing that we tested to make sure that our sea vegetables were okay for human consumption was to do microbiological tests. And so what you can see here is we did yeast, mold, coliform, E. coli, listeria, and salmonella. So the ones that you don't want to see anything in is right here. And the only reason you see little bumps here is because they detect it down to less than 3 mpns, and so they can only go so low. But there was really nothing detectable in any of these harmful microbes that are in the seaweeds. But what you will see is that for the sea purslane and for the sea asparagus, and a little bit for the gracilaria, you'll see that there's a little bit of natural mold and yeast that's growing on. And I suppose that's not really unusual because it's airborne. And so a lot of our vegetables and plants do have some form of yeast. We'll be looking into it a little bit more. But the good thing is if you cook with it, it goes away. So I've been eating it a lot. I haven't had any harmful effects. So that's really good. But what's super interesting is I want you to see this big spike here. And that's for the sea purslane. And if you think back a few slides, the sea purslane also had vitamin D in it. And it could very well be, and Peter McCarthy, Dr. Peter McCarthy, who's in the back, and I are going to look and see if the yeast is actually a producer of the vitamin D, because yeast and molds and fungus does produce vitamin D too. And if you buy a mushroom that's been in the sun, you're going to get a lot of vitamin D from that. So we're quite interested in if these beneficial yeasts could actually be contributing to the high vitamin D in the sea purslane. Okay, so on to the next one, and that we did look at heavy metals, the class 1 metals, which are your arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury. And I'm happy to say there's no lead and mercury at all in our samples. And in the Gracilaria and in the sea purslane, there's a very small amount of total arsenic and cadmium. And I want to tell you, it's really small. This is where the FDA standards are for inorganic arsenic. Now, arsenic comes in two forms, organic and inorganic, and we tested the total, so we don't know the difference yet. But it's well below the FDA standards. And arsenic actually is natural in our environment. It's in our Earth's crust. It's there, the same with cadmium. And it's just that some of the inorganics come through from the industrial era. And then the French, I was looking around to see if there was some level for cadmium for seaweeds, but I found that the French have come up with a level right here, 0.5, and you can see that our cadmium is below that. And then I looked at Maine dried sea lettuce, and there is 0.2, so I would say this is the sea lettuce here. So I'd say that we're well below any issues having to do with metals. So I'm going to summarize real quick, and then we're going to move into cooking. In summary, we talked about the sea vegetables, how they are low in cholesterol, high quality proteins, lots of vitamins and minerals, contain beneficial salts and iodine, no mercury or lead, below the standard amounts of arsenic and cadmium, no harmful bacteria. And so I also want to leave you with these thoughts. We're going to continue to look at product development and also marketing of these seaweeds and how they can go to market. And then we're also going to look at new species of sea vegetables in the coming year. And we're looking forward to transferring some of this technology into the aquaculture industry here in Florida. And by the way, this is a sea purslane flower that I took under the microscope. These are absolutely delicious, and I would have had some today, but it was raining. And so the flowers didn't come out when I went to pick the sea vegetables this morning. So I know we're only halfway through and you haven't seen the cooking yet, but have I convinced any of you that haven't eaten seaweeds that you might think about exploring them? I see one person down here. Anybody else? Okay, excellent. Okay, let's switch gears. What's that? I am going to take questions while I cook. I'll take questions. Okay? All right. So, Jill, we're going to move over to the cooking table. Okay, well, let's get started. The first recipe I would like to cook with you all today is the coconut milk agar, which is on page 4. We're going to cook with agar, which is right here. It's a flake. And this is from the red seaweed Gracilaria. So we need to start off with 2.5 cups of water. Once we get this boiling, I'll take a couple questions. So there's 1 cup. Two cups. And a half. Okay, so we'll get that going. And then the next thing we need to put in is a 1/2 cup of sugar. Then we're going to put in the agar. So just as a rule of thumb, it's 1 tablespoon of flake agar per cup of liquid. And if you end up using powder, it's half that amount. So,
Question.
sure.
Why are you using so much sugar?
What's that?
Why are you using so much sugar?
1/2 cup?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be 4 cups of liquid when we're done.
Is there a substitute?
You could substitute with any of your other favorite sweeteners. You could use honey, you could use maple syrup, you could use brown rice syrup. I just wanted to follow the traditional recipe. This recipe comes from Hawaii, and actually Dr. Paul Wills introduced me to this recipe because he said he used to eat it as a kid. You're welcome. Okay, so there's our 4 tablespoons. And it's best to use a whisk here. We're going to whisk this. The most important thing is to get the sugar and the agar to dissolve. And you can start to see it glistening on the top. And we need a pinch of salt. Just to bring out the flavor. And while that's starting to get hot, this is the coconut milk. You can buy it at Publix. It's unsweetened, and it's the full coconut milk, so it has the cream with it as well. When am I going to open a restaurant? I would love to open a restaurant. And every time I say that, somebody talks me out of it. Maybe my husband. He's like, oh, you're going to have to work very hard. I'm like, well, I'm kind of working very hard.
Where did you buy the agar-agar?
The agar-agar, on the back page of your recipe book, I actually bought it at Whole Foods, but there are a few other places that you can buy it. Now you can see the top of this is all the coconut cream, so that's important to have. Oh, actually, I'm not going to put it in yet. I want this to get a little hotter. I actually made some last night so you could taste it because it takes like 5 hours to gel. So I wanted to show you how to make this. I also put in an extra recipe on page 5, how to use agar-agar to make a very simple canteen just with fruit juice like apple juice and strawberries. And so it's delightful, and it's a really... And that one, you don't have to add any sugar. You just use the sweetness of the juice itself. Any other questions while we're waiting for this to boil?
No, I just was going to ask, because I go down to Trader Joe's. But
Trader Joe's will have it.
I know, but it's far.
Oh, I know it's far. Tell me about it.
You can't find these in Whole Foods.
I think, no, you won't find agar. Well, you might find agar-agar, but not this particular brand, or you can just order it online. It's very easy to order online. So
All these sea vegetables, these are all the controlled grown or not?
these are all grown in our facilities here.
You sell these here.
Here, the ones that I'm using today. Yeah.
So you test all these vegetables, these different elements. How do you get a good reproducible sample?
So for the nutrition labels, the question was, how do you get a reproducible, if you're growing them all the time? So one of the things that we wanted to look at is possibly seasonal changes. And so that's something that you could look at. In terms of the nutrition, we've done a couple samples like that. I haven't seen a big difference from the nutrition side. Now, the microbes might change, especially the yeast and mold over time, but not. I mean, we're starting to look at some of that over time.
Stability.
Yeah, stability.
Stability data on that?
Stability data?
Once you cut it and store it.
Ah, the shelf life. We're working on that too. I have some seaweed in my office that's been there since September. It's dry though. Because if you walked in my office and it had been fresh, that would have been, ugh. And we're going to send it in soon to see how it does over 6 months of period. But they say seaweeds they have a shelf life. They stay for 2 years, but honestly, as long as it's kept dry, as Dennis says, it can last forever as long as it's dry. Okay, we've got a nice boiling going here. You see that? We're going to add in, and everything's dissolved. So now we're going to add in this next part.
Who developed all the tests
The test?
to monitor all your vitamins in a product?
Well, Midwest does that as part of their Midwest laboratories. They do that. They're FDA certified to be able to do that.
What is the common seaweed that we have around in all the beaches? We have a photo putting it in your mouth, the big
Oh,
red leaf. What kind of seaweed is that?
so the one that's in your speaker thing today with me eating seaweed, and the one that I showed up on the screen, that's a big kelp. And that was in Washington State. And actually, it was kind of bitter. So if you saw my face after that photo was taken, but I'll try any seaweed on the beach. But they did have beautiful dulse, and they had a lot of really nice seaweeds along the coast. Now, see, we've added this coconut milk in, right? And that's just going to come to a boil. And then I want to show you what the finished product looks like. So that's the top of it, right? Now look at the side of it. Isn't that pretty? So all the coconut milk comes to the top, and then you've got the solid. So we're going to cut this in a little bit, but you can see it's gone completely solid, right? So that's from the Agar, but it does take a few hours for that to happen. So we'll cut into this in a little bit. Okay. What do they say about a boiling pot?
Was the cream, was the white on top of the coconut milk?
The coconut milk is on the top.
It was the oil, coconut
Yeah, it's like the cream that comes up to the top.
over the watery coconut.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Has anybody ever had that before in Hawaii? No? It's a really delicate dessert. It's very nice. All right, this is almost boiled, and then we'll pour it in the pan. Then we'll be done with that dish, and we'll move on to the next one. Okay, the next one is going to, I'll just let that go for a second. The next one's going to be with, what's the species? Gracilaria, red seaweed. And I got to tell you, Dennis, this is beautiful. when Rich and I harvested this morning in the rain, I was just like, we were both marveling at it. So it's a very, very pretty seaweed. Right? So we're actually going to do something very interesting with this seaweed.
Now, would you find that right out here?
You would find it in the Indian River Lagoon. I'm not sure you'd want to eat it out of there. Okay, we're starting to get some boiling action. One of the things is whenever you work with agar, you've got to make sure that you boil it and it comes to a boil. And we've got this boiling, so that's perfect. I'll switch over, Brian, in a minute. Okay, so we're going to pour this next.
Is there any seaweed that's not digestible for humans?
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot of seaweeds out there that you wouldn't want to eat. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Whoa! Okay. I know, right? Okay, here we go. Wow, we got a good chuckle out of that one. Maybe I should stick to science. So what you can do is you can put it on your counter and let it cool down, maybe an hour or two, and then put it in your fridge. I like to cover it with this bamboo mat and just let it sit for a little while. So we'll see if it gels. It won't gel by the time we're done here. Okay. Let's switch over to this one. You're going to really like this. We are now moving to page 2. And this is called Oh No Oh Go salad, which is a uniquely Hawaiian dish. And ono in Hawaiian means delicious, and ogo means seaweed. And there's 3 different dressings that we can use. We'll probably just stick with one of them today. So what you do first, if you read the instructions, is you get your seaweed, and you may need to remove barnacles or things like that. But because we grew it in our system here, there's nothing to remove. It's all seaweed. Beautiful. So what we're going to do is blanch it. So we have our water here. That's boiling. Now I want you to watch very carefully. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any future plans to sell any of the seaweeds that you're currently growing to the public?
We hope so. Yeah, once we can figure out how we would do that from a marketing standpoint. Yes. Okay, here we go. So watch carefully. What's the color of this? Reddish brown, right? Okay, ready? What color do you think it's... Oh, I'm not going to ask you. Oh, yeah, that's what I said too. The first time I did this, I was like, whoa. Dennis, you ever seen this before? And you only put it in for a split second, and you can see that I'm putting it in cool water. If I was at home, I'd be running it under the sink, under the water in the sink. You really need to do it fast. Otherwise, what's going to happen is the agar is going to start to come out in it, and then it's going to be all gummy. And we don't want gummy seaweed.
Why does it change colors?
I don't know. You have to be very fast. You can see that it's like in and out as soon as it turns green. Okay, so next step.
So your future plans are trying to go into commercial use?
Yes, if, we'd really like to have a producer produce it in large quantities, because we do it more experimental quantities. No, it's grown outside in the outdoors, natural sunlight and
They
everything.
control the water quality.
We control it through our integrated multi-trophic aquaculture system. So it's very clean. You can see that our results were very clean.
So that's like in-house anyway, you can control all that.
Exactly. So we would teach people the technology. But just have to pay attention for a minute. We're going to do dressing number 2. And so I need a half.
What kind of demand there is out there?
Well, what kind of demand? So that's the big question. And so we know that there's a lot of demand for certain types of seaweeds in certain parts of the United States and certainly overseas. So that's something that we're looking into.
Probably have to start giving them some little babies so they can get them going.
Yeah, maybe. So we're going to do a 1/4 cup of lemon. This is a really delicious recipe, and it lasts a long, long time in your fridge. Okay, so we have that. Then what we're going to do next is a half a teaspoon of salt.
Did you write a cookbook yet?
Oh yeah, there is a cookbook, yeah. Okay, and honey, this is orange blossom honey, Florida honey. What is it? How much honey? 2 tablespoons, okay. Okay, here we go. It's going to take forever to come off the spoon. We're going to mix this all up, and then, you know what? On honey, no, we don't work with honey. I'm going to put a splash of vinegar. Somebody should. Well, we're a Marine Institute.
Very good for the eyes.
Yeah. Okay, I want you to see now our green seaweed that's been cooled down. Right? I want you to see what color it's going to turn now. Let me bring it over here. So, what color did it turn?
Black.
Well, it's not quite black. It turned back to almost its original color, right? Isn't that interesting? Okay, we're going to let that sit and marinate while we move on to the next recipe. Okay, avocado. That would be recipe number 1. Okay, 3 ripe avocados. Cilantro, right? Combine in a bowl the lemon juice, salt, pepper. Oh, and look at this. All right, this is sea lettuce. Dried sea lettuce. This is fresh sea lettuce. Ova. Isn't that beautiful? So it was this much here that made this much. So that just shows you how much liquid there is in the vegetable. Okay, how many tablespoons of sea lettuce do we need? 4. 1.
How did you dry it?
I dried it in our oven at home on a gas oven. Can you see okay, Brian?
Yeah.
Okay.
A little closer.
A little closer? Okay. How's that? Okay, that was 1, right? 2, 3. Who's going to taste this when I'm done? 4. Okay, we need that. We need some lemon juice and some lime. There we go. Did I tell you that I'm taking voice lessons? And that next year I'm going to be a singing chef? Would you come? There's a lot of hype around avocados these days, right? Yeah, they're good for you. I hope one day that seaweed and sea vegetables has the same hype. That would be awesome, wouldn't it? All right, lemon juice. What else? A little bit of salt. How much salt? Pinch of salt. Just enough to taste. Okay. And instead of the crushed pepper, which I got really scared when I looked on the internet, this is serrano pepper. They say it's like 10,000 to 25,000 on the scale, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to touch that. That's way too hot. So I just put a little bit of cayenne in. Okay, what else? Lemon, salt, hot pepper, sea lettuce. Cilantro. Where's the cilantro? Yum. Do you guys like cilantro? A little bit. I think I'm going to go over, how do you all feel about that? I think I'm going to go over in my time that I have with you. I understand if you have to leave, but you'll miss out on the tasting.
When you get seafood or seaweed salad in a Japanese restaurant, what kind of seaweed is in it?
So that's wakame, or wakame. Yeah. Okay, here we go. This is really good. I made this the other day just to practice, and I really liked it.
How do you tell when an avocado?
Well, I kind of like feel it. And if it dents in just a little bit, it's ripe. It should be soft, but not too soft where you indent too far. You see how I take the seed out? Just take your knife and then turn it. Okay, one more to go. Any more questions?
Would the FDA have to be involved in the marketing of this?
That's a good question. The question was, does the FDA need to be involved in the marketing of your product? So there's certain standards that you need to follow, and seaweeds don't have yet a strong standard. I mean, there's places that are starting to build that standard in. But there's certain things that you want to be able to promise your customer. And so FDA is definitely going to want to see the labels. They want to know that it doesn't have any harmful bacteria in it. Okay, the masher. Here we go. So here we go. Here's our avocado sea lettuce guacamole. Does it look good?
Put any nuts in there?
Nut? Who put nuts in avocado guacamole? So it's a beautiful recipe. Look how pretty that looks. Okay, in the sake of time, I'm going to let that sit for a minute before I plate it, and then we have one more to go. And that would be our cauliflower rice, sea asparagus, and sea purslane. Which is, what page is that on? Page 3. Okay, page 3. Who's made cauliflower rice before? It's good, isn't it? So you take the cauliflower and you chop it up, and I used a bullet. You can use a blender. Somebody earlier told me that they like to take the cauliflower. I mean, this is what it looks like when it's done. So it's really fine. You add a little olive oil, a little lemon juice, a little salt and pepper, and it's really good. It's really good. Okay. So need some olive oil. And we're going to add our onions. Oh, this place is going to smell so good. We're going to add a little bit of garlic. And this is the sea asparagus. So this is what it looks like. Actually, hold on a second. Let me show you this. This is so cool. This is how it grows. See the roots down there? So I took this out of our system today, and then it grows up like this. And so, doesn't it look like asparagus? Yeah. Right? So I'm not going to add any salt to this because the sea asparagus and the sea purslane are very salty. So, what's that?
With salt and they reduce splattering in the oil.
Well, that is true. Yeah. So I added a little bit of scallions to this. Now I'm going to add in, here we go. I'm going to add in the sea asparagus. Isn't that beautiful? And last but not least, this is the sea purslane. And so what I did is I pulled the leaves off the stems. So here's the leaves, right? I'm going to put those in there too.
What kind of wine do you drink?
What's that? Oh, what kind of wine? Oh, how do you think it would pair? Those that enjoy good wine, what do you think would go well with this? Maybe a white wine? A Pinot Grigio? I don't know. I usually cook with wine. I forgot my bottle of wine today. All right, so that's done. That's as much as you need to do, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plate up everything, and then feel free to ask me some questions if you'd like. All right, we're going to start off with the cauliflower rice. There we go. Fill that in. And put a few roasted pumpkin seeds on top. And we'll put some of this on top.
How are you going to price this stuff?
Oh, how are we going to price it? Well, we have to figure out how much it costs to grow it. And then we have to see what the market can bear. Yeah. Okay, so that's dish number one. Where's our avocado? Let's see. The guacamole will be over here. Okay. I think it needs a little touch of red. Put a couple tomatoes in here. Okay. Then we also have, we have the Ono Ogo. And I've decided with the Ono Ogo that it would go really well with some brown rice. And so here's our beautiful Ogo. I'm just going to cut it up just a little bit. Put it on top. And you know what else would look nice with that? You've heard of poke bowls, right? Well, they use sea asparagus in Hawaii for poke bowls. So we'll add a little bit of that. Okay, what else? Oh, the Jello. Okay. Wait until you see this.
Just like Chinese food, you're hungry after 2 hours?
Well, this would make a good appetizer. Okay, I'm having a little hard time just getting in this. There we go. Look at that. Look how pretty that is. Right? We'll put that in there.
You know, you may want to put a dye in there to get a smell something. Smell might be attractive.
The color, well, this is traditional. This is traditional. Here, we'll put a couple strawberries in there. Maybe a couple strawberries right there. There we go. Right? Okay. And one last thing. Need chips to go with the guacamole. Oh, we need something for the middle. How about a little bit of everything? There's your ova, there's your tiny bit of gracilaria. Because all of these seaweeds and sea vegetables make beautiful garnish. Okay, there we go.
Great front page of the magazine.
So you all have been a great audience. Your questions have been amazing. What I'm going to do is, because we can't have people come up on stage for safety reasons here, we're going to put out a little tablecloth, and I'm going to put some of the leftovers of things. I have some little cups and spoons. So if any of you want to taste something, we can help organize that today. Thank you so much.